at the end of the day, it began to be this thing of, wait, that isn't what I desire. I desire this. So it's been such an evolution that I'm still going through and understanding my own money, understanding my own wounds, understanding, myself better and all the things that brought me here.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship will hyper speed that for us, won't it?
Oh, totally. And there are so many things that you said where like, oh, I want to talk more about this, because I think in the example of holding on to the designer, it's like, we have to first decide that like we get to have exactly what we want and like really believe that universe can deliver it to a T. Hello, beautiful souls. You are going to love today's episode. If you want your story to sound like so many of the guests on this show, then you've probably realized that healing your relationship with money is a key piece of the puzzle. Don't worry, I've got you. Head to moneywoundquiz.com and answer 6 quick questions to learn which money wounds are blocking you. And I'll send you an email with a link to a money healing masterclass for free. No more waiting. Go take the quiz now. On this episode of the M Makes Money show, we are talking about how to build an aligned business. And I have an incredible interview coming up that really helps to emphasize this point, because my guest, Mary Morgan, like me, built a 7-figure business only to have to deconstruct and tear it down because it was totally out of alignment. So we trade war stories and really talk about some of the key lessons from that. But before we get into the interview, it made me really think about the question of, okay, so how do you build an aligned business? So I want to just riff on that for a second before we dive into this interview. From my view, and boiling it down to a 4-step process, to build an aligned business, number 1, you've got to really let yourself explore your desires. What do you love? What do you actually love doing? How do you want to feel? Really let yourself rip on this one, like journal it out, use feeling words and come up with your top 5 feelings so that you really get that emotional compass to know whether you're heading in the right direction and you're feeling how you want to feel every step of the way. Most of the time when we get out of alignment in our business is because we think that the end justifies the means. And it's, oh, I'm feeling a lot of struggle right now. I'm not feeling anything like freedom, but later I'll feel free. It's like, no, that is not an aligned business. It's got to be freedom now and freedom later. There won't be an end point where you feel free if the way that you're building it feels like anything but freedom. And that's not something we've been taught. So this is really new paradigm business building here. Number 2, hire coaches and mentors who have built something similar to what you desire, and then use them as a guide and a loose formula to begin. I am all for taking shortcuts. I'm all for learning from other people. And yet, step number 3 is then trusting yourself to deviate from that formula, to color outside the lines and really make it your own. That's the key to it being in alignment, for it feeling unique, for it magnetizing your soulmate clients. It can't look and feel like someone else's business. It has to be uniquely your own. And so, yes, you can start with someone else's formula or you can start with someone else's framework, but then you have to get to a point where you deviate and you turn it into your own work of art so that it starts to feel uniquely yours and comes into alignment with the dream that's inside of you. And everyone's dream is a little bit different. So then step number 4 is knowing that any negative experiences that you have along the way in entrepreneurship, which you will, are really just providing you with contrast. And that contrast gives you the clarity of what it is that you actually want. So sometimes it's hard for us to know that we want something until we experience the absence of it, or we experience the opposite. And then it's, ooh, not that. Oh, okay. That means that I actually really desire this other thing. So for example, if you've built a business where you're on sales calls and you start finding that your calendar has 10 calls a week on it, and you start waking up on Monday morning and feeling the dread of having to get on all of those calls, that's the contrast for you to now say, okay, so what is it that I desire? Oh, I want spaciousness in my schedule. I want clients to come to me without having to get on a call. Ah, okay. So maybe in your initial step one, you actually didn't even think of that as a desire until you experience the opposite of it. So really trusting that those quote unquote negative experiences are actually just teachers and help you get into alignment with what you truly want. So that is my 4-step process for building an aligned business. You guys are going to love my guest today, Mary Morgan. She is a business growth strategist. 3 years ago, she had $100 to her name. And then last year, she had her first $100,000 cash month. So she experienced so much tremendous growth, but also, as I mentioned, not all of it was in alignment. So her story just perfectly illustrates this, and you guys are going to love this interview. Hello, welcome back to the M Makes Money Show. I am so happy to have Mary Morgan here, and we are just going to dive into all things entrepreneurship and money wounds, building 7-figure empires, burning them down, building them back our way. So Mary, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm super excited because I know you've been talking about this recently in social media about like building a 7-figure business that you ended up hating. And I had a similar experience where we joined a very like bro-y kind of mastermind. And this was with the agency. And at the time, the agency was doing like 40K months and wanted to build a more like consistent sales system and all of that kind of stuff. But what I didn't realize was that we were going to end up building someone else's business, not the one that we actually liked. And so it did help us get to the 7-figure mark and start having like 100K plus cash months. But what we had to do in order to do that ended up feeling so bad. And we were attracting in like really the wrong kind of clients, which ended up being like such a nightmare for the team. And so it was like a building up and then an entire unraveling and undoing over the course of a year. So I'm actually really curious to hear your story. Like what happened?
Yeah. You know, it's so interesting. As you said that, something just dropped for me that I don't even know if this is relevant to share, but there was this moment I remember of being so tied to my client results. And as you're sharing this, I'm like, how interesting is it that sometimes we'll tie to results, but what are results? Like to you, you have all the things, but you don't feel successful. So it's so interesting to hear this because this was part of my story too, around like being on the flip side of this, even with my clients and being so tied to their results. But now, as you say this, like it paints such a beautiful picture of, but you're not happy. Is that actually result in our eyes? So
it's so true. And I think especially with the work that we do, it's almost even hard to boil down client results into a testimonial because it's like, how do I give you the full texture of the fact that they're sleeping better at night? They're going on a vacation and really enjoying it, that they're like more intimately connected to their spouse. The things that we hear from our clients that are actually so worthy of celebration are not very easily captured and shared without feeling like weird about it. Like maybe I shouldn't be telling someone else this like very deeply personal thing.
I know.
So then we just make it about money, but it's not really about the money.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's like when we think about that, it's like that's not as sexy as made $50,000 in 3 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's not actually it though. So my story was similar to you. Like I did everything left and center to try and scale my business. So I was at 10 to 20K per month and it was at the plateau. I feel like it's around this range, 10, 20, 30, when you're like, okay, money's coming in. How do I scale it? So I tried ads. And I hired an agency to run our ads, putting maybe like 6 figures just into ads and doing that for a year. And then I went in the agency model and I hired someone. I was doing sales calls at the time. So I'm like, how do I duplicate myself? I'm like, okay, get more salespeople, get more sales reps, have an appointment setter and a closer. Like it was the full on like shebang. And then I was like, okay, this is a strategy. So where do I find these people? So I remember seeing an ad that was like, we will find the people for you. It's $0 essentially down to pay for your team. guaranteed, all the things, like super sexy, no risk. Okay, this is easy. So brought that on. And then they totally tore down my list. It was brutal. I remember having messages being like, I'm like going to not only block you, I'm going to tell everybody about what you guys are doing in the DMs. Like, this is not good. And I was like, hold on. That was my wake up call of what is happening in the DMs. And I feel like sometimes we move ourselves away from the business too soon. It was this moment of, okay, I'm good. I'm scaling. You guys take care of that. And I'm going to go do this. And then as I did this, I was so disconnected from what was actually happening in the roots with the people who were on my list. It was burning them all down. So I'm like, okay, moving away from that. Maybe I need to hire someone internally. So I hired an agency to go on Indeed and LinkedIn and find someone. And I found the most amazing person who has closed millions. Like, she's phenomenal at sales. And then what I began to realize is online sales is very different than like door-to-door sales. There's nurture time, there's lead up time. And like, for someone who's a sales rep who wants sales, it's a very different dynamic than just come in and nurture and connect. Like, she doesn't want to do that. She wants to get on a call with people who are like, okay, I'm in, and she wants to make her commission. So to me, I'm like, okay, that's not going to work. So then I did written sales letters and video sales letters and all of this. And I honestly did this for like years, going from thing to thing to thing, like program to agency to hiring. And it was just, I remember sitting there, and it was a moment where I remembered my first high ticket sale. And I was 19 years old. I was working at a fur salon here in Toronto at a like prestigious area in the city. And I remember walking in, and this woman put on a jacket, and I'm like, oh, you look so good in that. She just rolled her eyes at me. It's like, okay, first day on the job. Oh gosh. She puts on another jacket. And I'm like, I swear, everything you put on, you look amazing. And she was like, can you effing stop that? I get it. You're trying to sell. Like, looking at me dead in the eyes. And I'm like, breathe. And then I stood to the side, and I saw this gorgeous long pink fur jacket. I put it on, and I looked in the mirror, and I felt like I was editor-in-chief of Vogue, Anna Wintour, who Starbucks in hand, walking the streets of New York. And I feel a tap on my shoulder, and a woman goes, where did you get that jacket? And that was my first high ticket sale. So there was this moment sitting at my desk being like, I'm selling like this, but my power is actually in when people just find me, they connect with me, like that magnetism. So there came this second in time where I'm like, what do I actually want? And I started to see people who, when you see like feminine embodiment and like the total flip side, I saw people in bikinis like dancing around, and I'm like, who the hell are these people who are like not doing sales calls, who are not selling in the way that you need to sell in my mind? And that was like my 4-minute mile. It was that moment of maybe sales gets to be my own way, and I don't need to do it like this. And that's when I started to build in my way. I still had some of the masculine stuff come in. I still had this, and it was like me just shaping my path. What do I want? A little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. But like, to what you opened up the podcast with in this conversation of the results and like building, and it worked. I started to realize as I was still building this way, I was still attracting the wrong people. So that was the point in the sand where it was like, I was starting to get in the right direction, but now it was like, who's going to actually make it with me? What is my new standard? What am I now walking with? And I was like, I had a program that had 50, 60 people, and I brought that down to 5 people. I like cleaned out, and this was our like flagship group signature program. Yeah. And I was like, it was scary as hell going from like $80-something thousand months to now like $5,000 months just in this program. Yeah. So this was a moment of, there was a little bit of an ego hit too that I had to go through, because I'm like, people are going to see us go from this number to now this number. So there was that I had to clean up and really move forward with this perspective of, but what do I actually want? And it was, I want the right people. I want the people who don't just see this as a transaction, people who see this as a relationship.
Yeah, I so get that, because as you were talking about, like, especially bringing other people in to do sales, and even with ads too, like, you have to be careful, because you can get in people who are buying in a really dysregulated state. And so the sale is quote unquote easy, but what it leaves is that the fulfillment of the promise or the transformation becomes really hard.
And this is what I saw. So I actually had people, like, ads worked, so I can't say it didn't work. I had a 50K sale come in month like 1 or 2, and it was amazing. And then this person continued on and became a nightmare of a client. I was like, this was not it. And then I had another person who couldn't fulfill after 2 payments. So again, it's this thing of who do you actually want? How do you want to serve them? How do you want to show up? Not to say that ads don't work, because I think you can do it, but there was something about someone just not knowing me at all. And it was a transactional relationship versus I found you. Like, I seeked you out. I found you. And that felt different.
Right. Yeah. Like when clients hire me and they're like, oh, I've been listening to your podcast for a year, I feel so safe and comforted by that, because it's, you know me, you know what you're going to get. There's no bait and switch here. This is what it is. And now you just want closer proximity. You want to be able to talk back and forth. You want my eyes on your business. Great. This is going to be a fun one.
Yes. Yes. And I honestly feel like even with organic people who came in too, I feel like a part of it too is like how you set it up on the inside, because I've had some great clients come in, but then in the way that I would onboard, in the way that I was mothering, like I almost built the wrong people, if that makes sense, and their relationship to me, because the standard that I created, because of how I was like literally parenting them and spoon feeding them like babies. Now when that disappears, oh shit, all hell breaks loose, because now I've just lost my mom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was this weird dynamic. So there was a lot of cleanup, and this didn't happen overnight. This took months, honestly, probably years behind the scenes of things that were being shaped. So yeah, this was huge.
Yeah, I think you bring up something really important, which is like our own energetics. And when you were talking about it's guaranteed, we'll install this sales system in place in your business. And raise your hand if you haven't fallen for that stuff, because I think that's like an entrepreneurial rite of passage. But that's very much our wounded feminine. That is our damsel in distress who is, oh, look, a knight in shining armor.
Yeah.
Is riding up and is going to save the day and swoop me off to the castle. Like nothing will ever go wrong in my business again. And it's any time we buy from that place, what we're buying is a lesson. Like, we're not going to get that result. What we're going to get is an opportunity to reclaim our power and sovereignty, to recognize that there's like a huge difference between abdication and delegation.
Oh man, like just hearing you even say guarantee, I'm like thinking about all the crazy stuff that I've purchased because of a guarantee. And it does make it easy. It does make it an easy yes. Just like anything in life, it's who do you want? The person who's externally motivated or internally motivated? You see a gym sign that's 50% off. Like, you want that client, or you want the person who comes in, they looked in the mirror and they're like, I need to change something. I want that person, because they're going to continue in your business looking for external motivation, and that's going to be you. So this was a hard lesson that I had to learn. And even in my program, I had a guarantee in the beginning. It was like, if you don't make this much, work with us until you do, because that's all that I knew. So that's what I created. I realized like we had the worst relationships because it was never a relationship. It was a transaction.
And of course, then you're coming in the wounded masculine and like wanting to parent them and wanting to take over responsibility because you've set it up that way right from the get-go.
Yeah. And it would annoy me when people didn't do the work. It would annoy me when she didn't get results. There was a lot of like frustration with that stuff, which now looking back, it's funny because just like how we started, I'm like, who's to say what results are? Who's to say what success even is? But to me, it was like, if you're not hitting this, you're not successful. But for you, it's like that could take you so much farther out of alignment. So like, actually, it's taking you away from success. It's taking you away from fulfillment, satisfaction, and then into like frustration.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, again and again, like I see my role as guiding my clients back to their inner authority. And it's like, we can provide a menu. And I think as coaches and mentors, talking about different strategies that might work, sharing intuitive hits, and then also just like holding up a mirror to them so that they can really see themselves in their power. and get more clear on what it is that they do and like why it's important. All of that is so good, but it's our clients don't have to do it our way. And in fact, they shouldn't, because our way probably isn't the way for them.
No, 100%. Yeah. So this was the big piece. And that was my like burning it all down moment of these are not the right people. I will no longer do urgency and scarcity so that you buy. I will no longer convince you so that you buy. It was this whole, this is not what's happening anymore. This is what is. Let's basically delete this entire segment of my business. And then it was a restructuring. So it was very humbling, like I said, to go from like having this like safety, this security, to then being in this place where you're like, it was hard to pay my team. Like, how do you pay a team when you've got like barely anything in your account left? We talked about this actually just before we jumped on this recording around the wound. So for me, it was the disappearing wound. Yeah. So I'd love to bring that in, and from like your perspective, how that might have shifted things.
Yeah. So what Mary's talking about is she took the money wounds quiz, and her strongest wound was the disappearing money wound. And so it's like we project this fear of abandonment onto our relationship with money. And so it's like the more money we make, the bigger we build our business, actually the more fear and anxiety there is, because there's always this feeling of, but what if it all crumbles? What if the rug is pulled out from under me? And so it's interesting that you did create that in your business. And ultimately, you were the one who pulled the rug out from under you, which I think shows a lot of sovereignty and self-trust, that you're like, okay, I'm scared that I can't keep this up, but also I don't want to keep it up. So let's just get on with it and rip off the Band-Aid and start over.
Yeah, I think that was a big piece. Like, obviously it was like self-imposed, but then there's also the fear too of, even if it is self-imposed, like even if you're trying to teach a kid to swim and you're like, okay, I'm just going to jump in the deep end and figure out how to swim. And then you get in the water and you're like, shit, like I did not think it was going to be this hard. And you feel like you're drowning. That's how it felt. It was like this moment of, oh shit, what did I just do? There was this big piece of so many things. I feel like part of it was self-imposed, and part of it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it was going to happen because I started to notice, like, as I started to build a massive team, I had about 8 or so people on my team at that point. I was like getting frustrated with like meeting to meeting, like people weren't ideal on the team. And during this, I started to like coast because I just wanted a break. And I was like, finally, I have a team. So there was that, and then that dwindled sales naturally a little bit too. Yeah. And then I just dug it deeper and I was like, okay, forget that. Like, I think for me, I just make decisions like quickly. So I'm like, no, okay, we're getting rid of this. We're moving this. So I feel like a part of it was self-imposed. A part of it was like a prophecy that was just going to happen because of everything.
Yeah. Like sometimes we do have to experience it in order to heal through it and realize that, oh, okay, even if the money does leave at a certain point, like I'll be okay. And turns out I can still make more. So what are we really worried about here?
And it's crazy. Like we're still in the rebuild phase of all of this on the flip side now. But like I can already feel like the clients who are in my space right now, like when I get off a call, I'm like, okay, this is it. Like we had our group coaching call last week in the circle. And I was like, I actually even just this morning got a message from one of the women who just joined recently. And she was like, oh my gosh, like I feel, thank you for building this. The connections, I've been here for a week or two, and the connections I'm feeling with people, it's like I've known them for years. So I already feel this shift from like transactional relationships to hardcore, because it took maybe a year-ish in that full-on transition. And then it's like, now we're on like the 5% on the back end of it of, okay, this is it. And I feel everything coming through. So like those of you listening to this too, that are going through this like pivot, I've had so many conversations with women who are like, I'm pivoting from this industry to this. I'm going from this to this. I feel like in the beginning unsafe because it is unknown. It is so like different than what you're used to, but it's this realization of, but what do I actually want? So in that moment, sitting down last week being like, okay, this is it. Like, these are the people, these are the conversations. No more like small little tactical things. Like it was such a deep just juicy, just good conversation. And I was like, yes. So it was such a beautiful, like, I'm a Manny Gen. So my satisfaction was like, yes, I'm feeling this. This feels really good. Oh, I moved like 360 from, or 180, whatever it is, from like full on frustration and being on calls with people who are like, yeah, but I don't get it. That doesn't work in my niche. Like that frustration being like, okay, but it like, why isn't it landing? And feeling again, the babying to then this complete feeling of I barely say anything and you get it. So good.
I'm so happy for you. It's so exciting. And like when that becomes our point of magnetism, where it's, yes, more of this. Oh, this feels so good. Yes, thank you. I receive more, please. Like,
yes,
that's such a magical place from a law of attraction perspective.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like the biggest lesson that I learned, just like you, is like you get to do it your way. Yes, it gets to work in all the ways, but then your fulfillment and your satisfaction, that's going to come from your way.
Totally. And I don't think there's anything wrong with best practices. Like we want shortcuts and we are meant to learn from our elders or like other people who have done it. And it's just a fine line. And that's where energetics come in, is like really checking in with ourselves to make sure that we're not in our damsel in distress. We're not just like wanting to someone to come in and save the day, but like we're in our sovereignty and it's no, I legitimately feel really drawn to this, and how great that there's like a guide. And so it's okay, I'm going to start with tracing the outline of what you've done. And then I'm going to add my own embellishments, and like pretty soon it's going to look like my art, not your art.
Yeah, this is huge. And I feel like as you start making that shift, like I feel it in the potency of my content, in the potency of like my programs, all of that. Like when you are more in full alignment with who you are, as you obviously know as well, like you just feel it, people feel it, the magnetism is there, like everything just starts to move in a completely different frequency. Yeah. And yeah, so exciting.
I'm so happy for you. Yeah. And like I had to get crazy out of alignment too before I could like really see it. I remember a videographer was coming to our house because I was supposed to be recording all of these scripts that had been written for me from our ad agency. And I like started crying and freaking out that morning. And my husband was like, wow, what's happening? Because I'm like the cool cucumber in the family. So if I'm fine, everybody is fine. And he's like, why are you so upset? What do we need to do? And I was like, I don't want to record these videos. I don't agree with anything that I'm saying. My face is going to be all over the internet talking about this stupid shit. Like, I'm just so over it. And he's, oh my God. Okay. All right. We need to make a big change.
Oh my gosh.
I know. So dramatic. But it's like, it's like universe was trying to tell me and trying to whisper, and I wasn't listening to the whispers, and I like wasn't listening to the shouts. And so then it was like the 2x4 over the head before I could finally be like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Something's really off here.
Yeah. Universe is, you good? Come on. Here we go.
Yeah.
Honestly, I noticed something really similar too. I was working with a graphic designer for about like almost 2 years, and I kept feeling like, why doesn't he get it? Like, I used to be a designer as well, so I felt like I had to literally explain my vision. Put the sun in the upper left-hand corner. And I'm like, I am not. He was like, can you fill out this design brief? And I was like, that is not me. I don't even know how to take my vision and write it. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
I'm like, this is the vibe, create magic. That's it. And I would love that. When I used to do design work for people, I'm like, give me the vision. Yes, I feel it. Okay, let's go. Yeah. So I stayed way too long in that partnership. And I remember being like, and again, maybe it's the disappearing wound that shows up in other areas too. But there is a part of me that he's really good at design. Will I find someone just as good? Okay, can I handle then let's just put up with it. Let me just try and figure it out. I took communication classes. I thought it was communications. I thought it was me. And then I'm not even kidding. Like this actually was super recent. I let him go not too long ago, hired someone, and we just started working together like within the last 2 weeks. So she did her first like design thing yesterday, done in a day, so easy. I was like, what is this? People who actually are leaders and get your vision, like mad. He was the last team member that I kept on forever because I was like, I don't know if I can find someone. And I remember one of my mentors not too long ago, she was like, why are you just keeping this person on? And I feel like it was like a safety attachment that was there. It was this feeling of, it's what I've known, it's what I've had. Do I just let this person go? What happens to them? What happens to me? It was just this, we're used to it. Yeah. And we see this often in all things. Like, I stayed with my partner prior to my fiance for 6 years, knowing in year one that he wasn't the one for me.
Yeah.
But I just stayed on for 5 more years because who knows, maybe he changes. Like, and we do that. Yeah. It's so interesting that you brought that up because I'm like, not just in the money stuff, but in all parts of our businesses or lives, like we hold on to things that don't serve us, but we just do because they feel safe, because they feel comfortable, because we know. And I feel like in how I grew up, it was you want to find safety. And I think this is for all of us to some extent, it's like a human need. But for me, I grew up in a very like Christian vanilla household where it's like, there was just nothing of exploration to dive into. Yeah. Like even ziplining, don't do that. That's crazy. That's unsafe. It's mom, you're like 2 feet above the ground. Like you'll be fine if you fall. Like little things like this, right? But they add on over time. When you then detach from that and then you begin to build your own life, you're like, okay, what does that look like? Because I've been safe for this whole time, what does that now look like? Yeah. So that was an interesting piece that came up around like safety as I looked at my business. Like I thought, hearing 6 figures, like in the beginning, before I even came into coaching, like I had my own design business and I was like making 6 figures, like you're balling. You've got a Lambo, you've got the whole shebang set up for you. And then it's, oh no, that's actually not a lot of money. Like,
right.
Inflation, okay, that'll get you like a lollipop.
Right.
So it's like at the end of the day, it began to be this thing of, wait, that isn't what I desire. I desire this. So it's been such an evolution that I'm still going through and understanding my own money, understanding my own wounds, understanding, myself better and all the things that brought me here.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship will hyper speed that for us, won't it?
Oh, totally. And there are so many things that you said where like, oh, I want to talk more about this, because I think in the example of holding on to the designer, it's like, we have to first decide that like we get to have exactly what we want and like really believe that universe can deliver it to a T, not like they gave me these 3 things, but they left out these, but it's okay. Like, we'll just make it work. And I find that like again and again in manifestation work, it's universe will always give you like a test, which is the close, but not quite. Yeah. And it's, are you going to take the bait? Are you willing to settle? Because if you are, that's fine. Yeah. But like, you don't get the thing you really want until you're willing to forego the thing that feels like settling. And that always feels like a loss first. It's like you had to let him go, which feels like you're losing this thing that you already have in order for the thing you really want to come in.
And it's so interesting because I feel like a part of me just didn't even, again, I thought it was me. I'm like, it's just, I don't explain like that. Maybe I need to be better at explaining things. Right. And I didn't even see that as a possibility. I didn't even get that would be possible, that someone could just take 2 words that you say and be like, boom, done, I've got you. But I was that kind of person. But I'm like, I'm one of a kind. No one is like me. No, there are millions of people just like you that are out there. Yeah. So I feel like a part of it was just the belief. Again, of being in masterminds, being in communities and hearing people say, no, I don't have that experience. I just tell my designer this and we're good. And I'm like, okay, so it's out there. It's possible. So then it was, the manifestation of finding that person for me.
Yeah, totally. There have been so many times where I'm like, I'm really glad that God dreams bigger than I do, because like, I didn't even know that was possible for me.
You want to hear something so funny? Actually, when I was like 16, 17, it was like my first like child love that I had this crush on this guy. And I remember telling my mom, he broke up with me. And I told her, I'm like, Why did this happen? I was so frustrated and angry. She's like, don't worry. It'll all work out. And I'm like, no, you need to promise me that it's going to work out. Putting all of it on her. I'm like, you need to promise that either he's going to come back to me. And she's okay. What if he comes back or better comes back? That I'll promise that. And God will promise that. And I've got it. And I found that piece of paper where I wrote down like this or better, essentially about that relationship. I found this not too long ago, like 2-3 months ago, we were opening up boxes and I found this freaking sheet of paper. And I'm like, does God deliver?
Yeah.
So it's so funny because there's some little things like this. Looking back, it's laughable. But in that moment, like that was my whole life. I'm like, this better work. Like, this is it. And it's like, there are so many moments, even in our business, that I feel like we see it as such a make or break. Is this has to work, and you'll be fine. You'll be safe.
Totally. Yeah. I just came back from Egypt. And so I'm still like trying to integrate all of the magic from that trip. But I'm like, isn't it fascinating that like the ancient Egyptians were like, okay, how do we make paint that's going to last for 5,000 years? And like they were asking themselves these really big questions. They were paying the people building the pyramids with gold. That was the payment method. And I'm like, I'm just over here trying to build $1 million coaching business.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just funny that like what we're doing is not that hard in the grand scheme of things, but it still feels so important and so big and so difficult at times.
And when you say it like that, like it makes what we're doing sound small. Like it really sounds small, and it's okay. We need to think bigger and play bigger, because like it's $1 million business or whatever. So that's not even it. It's what else is it? There's so much more. Like when someone tells me like, what do I post on social media? I see that as literally like not even a drop in an ocean. It's like a semi drop in an ocean. It's like the smallest little thing possible.
Yeah.
But when we actually start to like really, just like you said, ask questions like, what do I want to create in the world? Yeah. Things start to shift in how we show up and who we're being and level of attraction and just all of it.
Yeah. Like for me, it actually feels like a scary question to even think about my legacy in 100 years. Like I was like, would I even ask myself how to create paint that stays around for 5,000 years? If I'm being honest, no, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I would be like, oh, of course it's going to over time. And I'm just like playing in a very limited field of possibility, clearly. But then it's like the idea of my legacy lasting 5,000 years scares the shit out of me. And I'm like, okay, even 100 years, if I'm being completely honest, I cringe at that. If YouTube still exists in 100 years and somebody watches a video of me, like, I don't know, am I proud of what I was talking about?
We're going to be on like holograms. It's just going to be like a Emily hologram.
Totally. Yeah. What do I like? How do I want people to feel when they interact with the Emily hologram? What kind of transfer of knowledge is there? And that's just those are really big questions. And they're so much bigger than, like you said, what do I post on social media? The real answer is it doesn't matter, because tomorrow no one's going to pay attention to it anyway. We're talking about like a 24-hour creation cycle versus legacy work here.
Yeah. And I almost feel as you think bigger, like you know what to post on social media. So it's that stuff gets answered as we start to play like a completely different frequency. It's you know what to post, you know your offer is like you're good. It's all smooth sailing.
Yeah. You don't overthink it. And some stuff lands and is amazing and goes viral and gets you new clients. And some stuff you still feel really proud of. And apparently no one looked at it. And that's okay too.
No, it's huge. But like, even when we think about the work that we do, like even as we were talking about the quiz that you created and filling that form out, it's like, that is part of the legacy work. Imagine the generations that begin to shift as we just have this understanding of wounds that we hold and how we then not only parent, but show up in the world, change the world, be in the world. Like all of that gets evolved and things get eradicated, things get built in a completely different way. So it's like, although we think some of this stuff is small, is it really?
Totally. That's so true. And thank you for sharing that, because actually when you like said the quiz, I was like, oh yeah, like actually that feels so right in my body. If people are still taking the quiz in 100 years, like that I feel great about.
The holographic quiz.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It'll be like fake Emily showing up and asking you the questions, like interview style.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
But that does feel like a big piece of my legacy work. And it feels like something that like I genuinely am like, great. If 1 million people took that, or if people were taking it in thousands of years, like I feel so good about it. So thank you for reflecting that back to me. I want to circle back to really briefly here, because I think this is something I see come up when we talk about milestones with money. And for a lot of people, like stuff comes up around 100K, whether that's in a year or in a month, but really it could be anything. And so I suspect that there was some identity work and some attachment around the meaning of running $1 million business.
Yeah.
Can you share what that was and how you had to lead yourself through the deconstruction of that?
Oh, what a good question. It's so interesting when I look back at the journey. So I feel like there were so many identity shifts that I can pinpoint. Like the first one being when I made my very first investment in this space. It's like my first investment was $6,000. I made $90, like blah, blah, blah. But like my first coaching investment was $6K, and I had $6,100 and something dollars in my account. So I drained my account, leaving $100 to my name. And I remember speaking to like my fiance, my mom, should I do this? I don't know. Like it was this whole huge decision. And I made it so in this way of, okay, this is going to work. This is going to work. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do the work. Okay. And then I became the best student. I got on 165 sales calls before closing a single client, who then wanted a refund within 5 hours. So here I am. It's my fiance's birthday. We're heading downtown and I get this message being like, actually, I can't make this happen. And I was like, I am not cut out for this clearly. Like people are doing something else, whatever it is. This is just not it. I can't do this anymore. And I stuck with it. Obviously, as entrepreneurs, we have this thought 1 million times per day, per year, per whatever. And then I saw this other investment come up. It was $20,000 to work with this coach. And I'm like, well, shit, I have $100-something and my credit card. And that's pretty much all I had. So I was like, I'm going to put my first month on a credit card. And I told my family, I'm like, I'm doing this. Like, it wasn't a should I, like my first investment. It was, hey, I'm doing this. I'd love your support. But if not, like, I'm going to do it anyways. That decision, I made it like how someone would buy Gucci versus Walmart. It's like you go to Walmart because you're like going to the cottage and you're like, oh shoot, I need a bottle. I need a sweater. Like I need a something. Like in the moment, let's just get it. Not like there's a different feeling versus like Gucci is, okay, I want that sweater. I'm going to get that sweater. There was like a frequency that I moved in that second decision where I really started to just move in a completely different way. And it was from a place of this would be amazing. And I took my power back and I didn't put it in the hands of this program, this coach, this thing. It was like, I get my own results. That week, I made $20,000, which was massive for me because I'm like, okay, here we go. 7 months, nothing. And then I did this like masterclass. I had people attend and then booked calls. And then I closed all these sales within that week. So it was a 20K week going from nothing practically all year. So it was like, this was close to the end of the year. So I put my claims in taxes and it was 20,000 something. It was like just from this 1 week. It was hilarious, like looking back. But this was the first identity pivot that really started the ball. Like when I look back at in hindsight, the one that stands out the most is this. Then I would say right when I hit $1 million, seeing that in my Stripe account, how I felt was like, nobody gave me an award. I didn't get a participation ribbon even. It's like, you think that something's going to shift, but you're still on your computer. Like, I remember seeing it actually go from 909, blah, 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 to 1. And then I was like, wow.
You're like, where's the confetti cannon? Like, why isn't my computer lighting up and celebrating me right now?
Winner. Yeah, exactly. It's like literally nothing happened. So that was where I almost started to actually spiral down. Like it wasn't an identity shift. I feel like that's upward. It was actually downwards. I remember being at dinner with my fiance being like, I'm with the man of my dreams in the place of my dreams with more money than I've ever had. But why do I feel more broke now than I did when I had $100 in my account? My faith was dwindled in myself. Who I am was dwindled. Everything just felt off. It was like I felt everything in grayscale. It's like I didn't actually feel. It's like I was going through the motions. I was on cruise control. I was like, no confetti. This is great. Everything was just flatlined in my life. And that's where it began to be this journey of finding myself, finding home. What am I here for? Why am I doing this? Why am I the way that I am? Like, what do I actually want? And that's where this all started to come through. And that was then the identity shift. So it was almost like it went in reverse. It was like I hit it. And then I was like, I need to then be a match to sustain.
Yeah.
And to keep evolving and to make more. So then it became this moment of, who am I? Why do I want people to find me? Why do I want them to work with me? Like, I just started to reshift everything, take stuff off that didn't make sense, like clean stuff off. And that was like a huge piece. And like I said, I feel like this is something that's continuing to evolve and continuing to happen. And I feel like this will be something that will continue to come up in question of revisiting. I feel like a lot of the same beliefs keep coming up at every level, but in such a different way, but in the same way at the same time too. It's so interesting. So in the beginning, it was like, who would ever buy this if I launched an offer? And now it's, will anyone buy? It's like, we've never not had anyone buy nothing when I've launched something. Yet every time I launch, I still go, but what if no one buys? You move differently now. It's okay, whatever. I don't really care. Versus then it was like, oh my gosh, but what if? And it's like this massive big thing. And now it's okay if they don't, like, that's fine. It was like an attachment or like detachment that began to happen there as well.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. So how much money are you making right now? And where does money still feel hard or sticky at times for you?
So where money feels hard and sticky, I feel like it's the detachment that came up as well. Each one of our programs, like I separate them individually in a way. So we moved from one that was at like 100-ish K per month to then now that went from 5K, 10K to 20-ish K. So it's building up there. Yeah. Again, it's really like the aligned people. So I feel like in the beginning, as I was building, I was really looking at the numbers. Now I'll look here and there, but I don't even know to tell you like the exact number.
Yeah.
But I would say like the biggest like feeling that comes up is trying to think, what did you say was the attachment to it? Or what was the second part of the question?
So the two questions were, how much money are you making now? And where does money still feel like sticky, difficult or sticky?
Well, you could tell me where it feels sticky. I feel like where it feels sticky, like I think the detachment was right when we did the wound test. I definitely feel like there is always that validation, the attachment. So that's something I'm still working through. That's not fully complete. I don't know if it'll ever be fully complete. It's definitely a million times better than what it was in the beginning.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was that. And there's always, again, like the ego stuff too of this is not where I was. So there's that piece that comes up. But yeah, like I've
never had anyone on the show that can't answer that question. It doesn't matter how much money you're making or where you're at in your business. There's always a place where like, maybe not all the time, but something will come up and money feels a little tricky. And that's why I ask it, because we need to normalize the fact that there isn't some exalted state where money is effortless for me all the time. I couldn't possibly think of any time when it's an issue or I feel a little scared about it.
No. I feel like it's interesting because there's lots of little pieces. So I'm trying to think of which one shows up the most. Like I definitely feel like it's the validation piece that comes up and like the ego stuff. Yeah. But it's also like safety as well. Like that wound, I didn't get the full results, but that wound comes up a little bit too around does this making big pivots like this, like that's such a big decision. So like that piece comes up too where it's, oh my gosh, now what? I would say those probably like ego, validation, safety, which kind of all go together essentially.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. It's so true. It's always, what are we making it mean? And I find that we can just share like how many people are on our email list and we like don't get all funky about that. But if we have to share like how much money is in our bank account, all of a sudden, like, I feel the compulsive need to contextualize this and tell you why this number is what it is.
It's true, because I totally did that. I was like, don't know.
And it's just an interesting observation for all of us. So thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing so openly and vulnerably. Like, I know that everyone listening got so much value out of this. So where can they find you and connect with you?
Yeah, I would say that the best place is Instagram and the podcast, which we just started this year as well, which is super exciting. But I'll drop those so you can put it in the show notes or in the text below.
Absolutely. Mary, thank you so much for being on the show. To everyone listening, thank you for tuning in, and be sure to tag Mary, tag me on social media, and let us know what landed for you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Okay. How great was Mary? Her Instagram is at marymorgan.biz. So make sure that you tag her and share some love. My top takeaways were these. Number one, go back to what works for you. Like, how do people naturally want to buy from you? Can you study that and notice where it's effortless and in alignment and go back to that? Number two, guarantees and low risk or no risk promises are not the way, because there's always risk. There's risk of inaction. There's risk of wrong action. So if we're always taking a risk one way or another, it's standing in our sovereignty and choosing which risk we want to take. Number three, aligned clients over lots of clients all day, every day. Build a business so that you get to work with the dreamiest people that you actually love, instead of creating a volume business that doesn't feel good. Number four, can we recontextualize results? Because the dollar amount or the financial milestone is never the full picture. And number five, things can shift quickly when we come into alignment, like Mary having that 20K week. And the quick win is often the result of lots of behind the scenes work that never gets discussed or celebrated, like taking 160 sales calls without closing a single deal. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you loved this interview and loved this topic as much as I did. If you've been enjoying the show, please share, subscribe, review, and I will talk to you soon. Listeners like you have made this a top 25% global podcast, so thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this show with someone you love. I always appreciate listener feedback, so feel free to slide into my DMs on Instagram at mmakesmoney as well. And if you want to explore hiring me as your money healer and business mentor, check the links in the show notes to explore, or head to explore.emilywilcox.com. Until next time, I'm sending you all the magic money vibes.